afternoon. I'm editorial cartoonist Ted Rall coming to you from the left.
And I'm righty editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis coming to you from, well, the right.
And we are...
That makes sense.
Yes, indeed.
And we are DMZ America, the podcast, the only podcast you really need. It offers 100% of your podcast needs on a daily basis.
Don't confuse us with DMZ America, the sandwich shop. That's a completely different operation.
Or the interpretive dance troupe that we've heard such wonderful things about.
We have nothing to do with it, despite the fact that we are 62% owners. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Thanks for listening. The DMZ America podcast, for people who don't come on here all the time, is where Scott and I, albeit coming from opposite sides of the aisle, politically come together and try to find solutions to society's numerous pressing problems and its social issues, and try to see if we can find points of agreement in a civilized, rational way. And I think we're pretty good at it, actually. But of course, I would think that.
Of course. Well, yeah, no, it's interesting. I was just talking to a friend of mine who does listen to the podcast, and she was impressed by and totally agreed with the one we did on the Democratic Party and what the Democratic Party should do going forward by creating, and it should create a contract with America. Tell me and the rest of America exactly what you stand for and what I get if I vote Democratic, other than not Trump. We need more than not Trump.
We do need more than that. No question about it. So today's topic is, Scott, something that you picked. You were interested in this quote that Elon Musk says things sometimes. So let's talk about what he said when he went on Joe Rogan.
He was on the Joe Rogan show, and he said effectively that empathy is the enemy of progress, that we are too touchy-feely, that we're too nice, we're too feminine, we have feminized the culture. I mean, in the natural course that conversation takes, which is, do we have a man problem in this country? Do we have a man-boy problem? Which I kind of feel weird saying, because it sounds like we're discussing something else.
I do say the boy man, because man boy is like for older people who are old enough to remember.
Yeah. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about how males, masculinity is perceived in the United States. And it's been under attack. It's been under attack for about a decade. And, there's always a happy medium. I always talk about happy mediums. I'm conservative, small c conservative in my views, as you know, Ted, to your consternation. That I like incrementalism. I like to take things, slowly. And, so on the masculinity question, which has really come to a head, and I think it really now is playing to a political and cultural degree that we'd never seen before. When you had a whole generation, just effectively castigating and demonizing males, that, the whole phrase of toxic masculinity, which it struck me the other day, Ted, and you tell me if I'm wrong, as you want to do from time to time.
Sometimes, yeah.
But the phrase toxic masculinity, I mean, it's dehumanizing. It is demeaning, and it's meant to be. It was never, it started with the Me Too movement, which I supported and still do. I think that there are, men acting badly need to be called on their actions. And there are a lot of actions that men do that are pretty reprehensible. But the idea that the male in our culture today doesn't have, how can I put this, any standing. They don't have any examples of what 21st century, mid 21st century masculinity looks like even. So they fall back on the stereotypes. And so that's why you're seeing truck sales go through the roof. Don't believe me that men are under attack? Ted, one of your favorite statistics, look at college enrollment. Mm-hmm. Men are now 40% of college students.
College graduates, 40%.
That tells you that there's, they're being told that on campus they are not welcome. Kamala Harris campaign effectively said, "You're not welcome. Just sit down, shut up, stop being the ugly white male that you are, and vote for us." not a particularly effective campaign slogan. It's, and it's, and we're seeing this more and more. And yes, can there be whiners and out there that say, oh, men can't be men? I mean, there are examples. And I forget what are the twins' names that are being tried right now?
The Menendez brothers.
No, not those guys killing parents.
Well, they are getting a retrial.
Maybe they're still debating that, but no, there's a couple of the guys who are like, podcaster.
Those douchebags.
The douchebag, the total, complete, and utter douchebags who say that rape is okay, that women are objects.
Andrew Tate, right?
Is that it? And his brother? It's a pair of brothers. Anyway, but there's a lot of them out there that are now promoting. I mean, of course, you have the incel movement, which is, just, why don't women like me? Because you're gross. Because you're a smelly fat guy who lives in his parents' basement. I mean, it's hard to like, it's hard to respect that. But what does masculinity mean? Now, when Ted and I were growing up in the 60s, it meant something very, very different. It meant, men don't cry. Men don't, men take care of the family. Men go out and work. Women stay home and raise the children. Now, that was too strict and too tight of a structure. We found now that statistically proven that what is it? Somewhere in the neighborhood of 28 to 30% of people of both genders don't fall into or embrace traditional gender roles. And we should have a society where that's okay. But we also have to have a society to say that, Ted, you're the father of a male. I'm a father of two males. And I mean, I don't know I think the world is somewhat confusing for them. And it's become even more so now. I mean, do you have any direct experience without, I know we're both loath to drag our families into these discussions for obvious reasons, but I think that, what is a male today? What's the male role in society today? And am I absolutely off my nut in saying that there is absolutely antagonism and anger towards males that I think is beyond the pale and really hurtful to our culture and society? And the reaction is, because we're Americans and we never do anything half-assed, we're now, we're buying up trucks like crazy. We fly Trump flags off the back of those trucks. I think the growth of beards, the number of beards, men with beards versus men without beards, has exceeded men with. More men have beards now than don't have beards, and that hasn't happened in like 150 years.
It's an itchy and scratchy nation.
It is
So Scott, I mean, look, I have thoughts about this. So first of all, I want to be clear here that toxic masculinity is not, it's a term that's been weaponized against us men. But the truth is, it was meant originally as a term that showed sympathy for men and boys. Basically, a great example of toxic masculinity would be if you read In Our Time, which is an early Ernest Hemingway book. Hemingway is really misunderstood as sort of like very butch and hyper masculine. But at least in his younger years, he was deeply concerned with the toxic effects of the way that emotions and softness was ruthlessly crushed through our culture out of boys in order to turn them into hardened asshole men. And so, like, for example, there's one story in Our Time where it's obviously autobiographical, where he goes out hunting with his father and a bunch of other fathers and sons, and they kill, I think it's a deer, and it's gruesome and horrible. And he's a little kid; he's like 8, and he cries. And basically, his father hits him, and it's just like, "Cut the shit! Don't cry! Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?" And so, to me, that's like when I think of talk, that is how this was originally defined, as sort of like the victims of toxic masculinity were boys, not women, not girls, boys. And then these third wave feminists like sort of started I don't think they really knew what the term meant originally. I don't think they'd care if they did know. They just saw the words together and they're like, yeah, masculinity is toxic. And that's become like a more contemporary meaning. But that's not the origin of the phrase.
Interesting. Thank you.
And I think it's like how it's been like perverted is very emblematic about even something that was meant to show sympathy for us has been weaponized against us. Now, I don't blame women or girls to be resentful about like all the shit that cisgendered white dudes have pulled off over the years, which is basically 99% of all the shit is on us, okay? Or more accurately, on the people who came before us, right? And so the point is, the resentment is huge. And now what's happened is, I mean, I took this feminism class in the early 90s when I was in college, and my teacher, she had this great line. She said that she quoted, what's her name? Oh my God, Gloria Steinem, the really famous feminist. And she said, this was in the 80s, late 80s. And Gloria Steinem said, you know, now us women are finding our way, but the next big job, and it's going to be a harder job. And she meant it like a job for women as well as for men, to help the men. We've got to find a place for them. Well, here it is. It's 40 years later, and we're no closer to Gloria Steinem's advice than we were back in the late 1980s. I mean, men, like you say, Scott, they don't know what they're supposed to be. I mean, it's like so many cultural norms are still kind of hidebound into old norms. For example, you know, most women expect men to earn at least as much as they do, but the job market is changing, and that's becoming less possible, ironically, because, well, women's wages are going up, but men's wages are going down. But so that means that men are less so women are not really adjusting to the new era, and men are feeling left behind financially, educationally, in terms of social currency. In every respect, men and boys are being left behind. I have some statistics that I dug up that I think you'll find interesting. Okay,
hit us, baby. Hit us.
All right. So according to the National Center for Education Statistics, girls outperform boys in reading by 11 points by grade 4. That gap by grade 12 becomes 15 points. Boys drop out of high school at a higher rate than girls. 6.4% of boys, 4.9% of girls. And why? Primarily, it's because of teaching methods. When my son was in, I think it was 3rd grade, he went to a school that had about 40, 50 teachers. They had one male among all those teachers. Of course, the principal and vice principal were female as well. They fired the one guy. Now, I asked why, and they said, oh, well, he was late a couple of times. I'm like, when you only have one guy out of like 40, 45, you should probably try harder to make it work, you know? So of course,
yeah,
you know, teaching's a pink collar ghetto. So, you know, women be teaching in a female way, women be acting like girls. That's normal. And but the point is, there's not a lot of role models for boys in schools, and they're not taught that way. Let me tell you some other statistics. The American Psychological Association finds that boys have a higher rate of ADHD, far more than twice as much. 13% or more of boys have ADHD, as opposed to 5.6% as of 2018.
Wow.
It's only higher now. The suicide rate for boys aged 15 to 19, it's 18 per 100,000 people. That's 3 times higher than girls, 5.8. So it's like, again, there's a lack of positive role models. Boys are told in no uncertain terms to STFU and do not express yourself. No one wants to hear from you. You know, that I've seen that in leftist circles where, you know, like if a guy starts to speak up, and then someone will say like, hey, you know, we don't really want to hear that. We prioritize like female voices and voices of color, and you'll wait your turn. And if there's any time for you, we might talk to you, but we'll hear from you. I mean, come on, that's not what like first wave and second wave feminists were fighting for. They wanted equality. They didn't want dominance. They didn't want to switch from patriarchy to matriarchy. That's no more healthy. Matriarchy is no more healthy than patriarchy. Okay. And it's like, but that's not what they wanted. More statistics, right? So you mentioned, Scott, the fact of college enrollment. College enrollment for men during the pandemic, it dropped 5% in the fall of 2020. It only went down by 0.7% for girls. By 2020, men aged 25 to 34 at the peak of their early careers, right? 32% of men have a BA or a BS, as opposed to 41% of women. That's a big gap. That's not like,
Wow.
That's not a statistical rounding error at all. And it's like, so, and men are isolated socially. A 2021 survey by the Survey Center on American Life finds that 15% of men under the age of 30 say they have no friends or close friends. That's up from 3% in 1990,
wow,
compared to 10% of women. 30% of men aged 18 to 29 are not only single, but they're not even bothering to look for someone, as opposed to 18% of women. 28% of dudes under the age of 30 have not had sex in the last year. That blew me away. That's up from 10% in 2008. I mean, think about it. That's a 10-year gap where sexlessness, I mean, in your 20s, you're supposed to be boning like crazy. Seriously, it's going to be downhill from there. It's not going to be uphill, right?
Yeah. But no, as we know, because we're, sexy seniors, ladies likey, which is absolutely
Obviously
not the case. But you're right. And that's the other thing. And that's a generational thing. Does the sexless life extend to women as well? I have to believe it does. I mean, just given the number, just doing the math, right?
Yeah.
And this isn't, I also want to point out, and just take a quick side trip here, Ted. This isn't some heteronormative, pounding of chests here. One of the most masculine guys I ever knew, a dear friend of mine named Greg Lightbody, passed away from AIDS many years ago, but he wrote for virtually every outdoor magazine and wrote went and killed many animals. and wrote about off-road vehicles and stuff. So I think what I'm talking about, Ted gets invited to a thing I have. It used to be once a month. During COVID, it's really fallen off, and now I probably do it 4 or 5 times a year, but it's a Zoom call, and it's a bunch of guys only, and we sit and we drink cocktails and we smoke cigars, those who want to do either or, and we just talk. And usually, we have some really smart guys and we talk about smart stuff. And so mostly almost always devolves into talking about movies and shows to stream, because, that's the conversations today. Ted doesn't show up very much. It makes me very sad, but that's another podcast altogether. My point is that that to me would fall into the definition of a masculine moment, which is, and maybe even a stereotype. The age of this group is generally around my own, although we have some younger guys. But like I said, smoking a cigar, talking trash, just being men. A friend of mine has a yearly camp out with his family, his brothers and their kids and his kids, and I've gone with my kids. Again, all males, and it's different. It's not there to. We don't talk about, and we don't talk horribly about women. We complain because that's what we do, but we don't.
Plus, they're women. They do things that are annoying.
Well, yes, and I suspect we do too.
I've heard that, but that can't possibly reach. That can't.
Well, not you and me, but other guys.
Other dudes who we don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. So my point.
I used to go to Boy Scouts with my son, and we went to, and they now it's Scouting BSA. Yes. I guess they're going to drop the B out of the SA at some point. And so women, not only girls are now included, but also, female troop leaders and such. And I remember, so my son and his friends and a bunch of us dudes were walking down to the lake from camp, and some like busybody like woman is, it's kind of like, who are you? She's like, you can't walk barefoot here. We're like, we're in the woods. We're feral. We're walking. It's like,
yeah.
Yeah, we'll do. And it was kind of amazing because some of the dudes were like, fuck you. And I was like, whoa, they're being disrespectful. And I'm like, but they should be disrespectful. She was in our space. And it's like, and the point is, I got to say, honestly, it's not good for scouting that women have been admitted. I mean, I understand. I wish Girl Scouts were, I know Girl Scouts, some girls just don't find it challenging enough. They should make it more challenging. It'd be better. I mean, girls can do everything boys can do, for sure. But there's a place for gender segregation. It's a different kind of place.
Well, let me ask you this. When you hear the word masculine or masculinity today, what does that mean?
Well, I mean, the problem is that it's like we have this cartoonish masculinity that's embodied by, like, Donald Trump, who in my mind doesn't, to me, like, look, these are words, and words, the meanings of words are always argued about, right? But to me, masculinity is about, and should be about, basically traits that are common to men, both positive and negative. And among the positive ones ought to be like the certain ideals, which are to be protective, to be caring, to be brave, to be someone who is generous, calm. These are like, kind of like ideally what a man should be. Donald Trump has none of these characteristics. Okay.
No.
But I guess you could say might be brave. He's been through a lot of shit legally.
Frankly, he was shot and bleeding, and
that's true. That was brave. He behaved himself. But I mean, the point is that, like, to me, that's not like really what a real man is like. But I mean, it's subjective. But when I think masculinity is sort of it's not the antithesis of feminism. It's the antithesis of femininity, right? So what is that? And we can argue about it. It's different things for different cultures, for different people. But whatever it is, it shouldn't automatically be considered bad. And there just doesn't seem to be a place for it. And especially, look, this is where I was waiting for you to attack liberals, and I think you were going to be right. I mean, it's like, I mean, liberals have been very mean to masculinity and to male ideals and for a while now, and I don't see a way out. It's only getting worse because it's kind of like we're being told, just shut the fuck up. No one needs you. I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, I could name some specific examples, but like if you're trying to pitch a show in Hollywood these days and you're like, oh, it's really unfortunate if you're a white guy, like they're really not going to want to hear from you. It's almost like you'd be better off pretending to be a black, like, lesbian woman, and then you might be able to, play something in Hollywood or sell a book, or they don't want to hear from us. They don't think they're going to make any. I mean, the irony is, go woke, you go broke. There's all these Hollywood shows that have been like very minority centered that haven't done very well and have had to be canceled. A lot of book memoirs have not done well. I mean, look, there should be space for all of it, right? I mean, we're one big society. It should be roughly, if white people are 50% of our population, which they are, about roughly 50% of everything that's out there should be about white people. If black people are roughly 15% should be about them, and so on. I don't understand why that's such a hard concept.
Well, because I think the attitude is we, and I'm going to say, because you and I are both white males, have had our day, and that day is over.
Right.
And now it's time for you to pay, to pay the piper. And we're here to, you talk about dominance. And I thought that was really well put and very jarring, because you're absolutely right, Ted. This isn't about, leveling the field. It's about diminishing one person, one aspect, one group of people so the other can rise up. And that's, I've never understood that attitude. We want to, eat the rich. Well, no, I know I want everyone to have the same things the rich have. That would be my preference, given a magic switch that I could turn. You can't. And like you said, and how many instances have there been where you felt extremely uncomfortable? I mean, I know I recognize that's, this flies. We were just having statistics, and so that backs up much of what we're saying. But also, how many instances? I mean, I can tell you numerous. It's one of the reasons I left newspaper business, is that the attitudes towards me, looking like I look, was made me uncomfortable, pissed me off. And so, yeah, they're going to be women and they're going to be minorities who say, yeah, how's it feel, asshole? And I was one of those
I've
people.
heard that directly, even from like friends, like women who are friends, like, oh, poor baby, sucks to be you. And I'm like, well, I see their point, but it's not a very like deep, it's not a really profound point, is it? I mean, we all have, and the thing is, in the same way that like when women are mistreated or neglected, you're not just talking about them on their own level. You're talking about our sisters, mothers, our spouses, our lovers. We should care about them also, because we're all integrated, and vice versa, right? They should have the same exact attitude. I think Scott just disappeared here. Let's go ahead and bring in producer Robbie West. Robbie, you're gonna fill in for Scott, who's just disappeared here. So you've been listening to the discussion. Oh, here's Scott. Let's bring Scott back.
He's back. Robbie, Jesus Christ, man. You're just like, fuck Stantis, get him out of the way.
He's late.
It's Robbie time.
He's being the girl here.
Hey, in my defense, this is not my idea. You can blame Scott for making me the third wheel. Not Scott, Ted for making me the third wheel.
Now he's just stereotyping just right into our conversation. It's like
we
all look alike. We all look alike. And
That's true.
In his mind, all white guys are the same.
What you mean we're not?
No, we're not. And that's I was just mentioning when I left newspapering full time, it was just dealing with the males in the newsroom were not, and anything, they were very weirdly effeminate. I don't want to offend women by saying they were effeminate. They were just weird. And they, you'd walk into the break room and you'd go, hey, how's it going? And they'd literally like look up like scared and then literally run away. And I know I'm not alone in having this experience. The beating that these guys have taken in the workplace. And then of course, as Ted mentioned, if you walk in and there's women talking and then workplace, and they have absolutely no interest in hearing what you have to say or add, and you're viewed as the enemy.
You're viewed as the enemy. I mean, you could just say, like, I'll just say it. It could just be that these are like bitches, but I mean, because that's a thing too. I got to tell a funny story about that. I had years and years ago when my kid was little, my wife said, "Oh, you should take the kid to this they called it mother and baby play group at the library." So of course it's mother. And I'm like, mother, but I'm not a mom. It's like, well, just go. So I'm the only dude, and there's like maybe 15 moms and their little babies all crawling around. None of them would say a word. I'm like, hey, how's it going? Hi. Not even a hi back. Not even a nothing. I kept going anyway because I don't know. I just think maybe I'll give it another chance. So my one of my neighbors was Paul McCartney, and
I've heard of him.
And did this, and he did it too with his kid, and our kids were the same age, and at one point, Sir Paul turns to me and he goes, "This is the first time in my life where women just didn't want to talk to me."
And what do you? Go ahead. I was just going to ask. You go ahead, Robbie. I'll have a second.
Well, because I work in healthcare, and I mean, it is talk about a feminine industry. How y'all talk about the schools?
Pink collar ghetto.
In my field, it's exactly the same. Like in the department that I work in, what I do is I build medical records. It's me and one other dude, and the other guy works in the warehouse. So I'm the only one that's actually doing my job at a department of over 20 people. Well, when when I was the trainer teaching people, how to build medical records, because you have to go in and read the charts and figure out just, well, what is this exactly? Well, there's this one lady, and long story short, she's like, well, Robbie, well, what do you think this document is? I said, well, did you read it? She said, no. I said, well, maybe you should read it then, because you got to, that's the first step for this job.
There you are, mansplaining.
That's exactly it. She turned me in for bullying. And I ended up having to have a conversation with the department super. I kid you not. I bullied her for telling her, before you ask me to do your job for you, you should at least make an effort to do it yourself. And that was now keep in mind, I did not say this. I did not say, hey, no, do your damn job and then come talk to me after. No, me telling her to read this document was the wrong thing to do in a job that directly requires you to read documents, then use your head cheese to figure out just what is this. Because if I don't do my job, the medical record doesn't get built. That impacts patient care, and also then the hospital can't bill because you got to document everything that goes on. So it's kind of fundamental. But if you're accused of bullying by telling a woman that maybe you should read something before asking for help, I don't know how you fix that.
Yeah, but I would guarantee. So did you have to go through some sensitivity training? Did you have to go through? Oh,
I did.
Are you a better person for it?
Are you a better person for it? Sensitive as a result?
No, I'm a matter of fact. What I told them that I wanted to do, I wanted to work from home, which is what I do now. Some people do the producer gig for all these different shows, because I told them if I stay in this office with a bunch of these women who are just catty, I will get fired, and you will be worse off for it. So the best thing to do is segregate the population, let the hens have the hen house. I'll play in the backyard, and that way the work gets done. And that is the arrangement that we now have.
See, and that's what's so strange is that I've worked in feminist groups. I have a long story. I have, and ever since the 70s when it actually mattered. And now I'm viewed as this enemy, but it's also, is it generational? I mean, you have this, I mentioned the young reporters who are obviously considerably younger than me. What generation is that? Gen Z, Gen X, Gen?
That would be millennials, probably mostly people in their.
I'd say younger. Now. Yeah. Okay.
They're millennials though. I think there's not Gen Zers are just hitting the job market now.
Okay, so millennials, and it was, it was like, well, as Robbie just described, it was very hard to work in that environment when you're viewed as the enemy right out of the chute. And again, we're going to hear, oh, boo-hoo, how's it feel? Here's my answer to that kind of bullshittery, and it really pisses me off. It's sort of like when Republicans were like, "Oh, well, we're going to take back the Justice Department. We're going to go after our enemies. We're going to weaponize that." Well, but you just bitched and moaned about weaponizing it against you, and it was. Ted and I mentioned it many times on this podcast that that lawfare was being fought and waged against at the time former President Donald Trump, and it sucked. And it was wrong. My point is that when people say, "Oh, poor beautiful you," and how's it feel? It says, "Okay, you know what? It sucks for me just as much as it sucked for you." Yep. And here's what we're trying to avoid in this culture, presumably, is not have it suck for anybody. That there are no victims, that we're all allowed to participate and compete on a level playing field. But that I'm allowed to be me, and I'm allowed to smoke my stupid, stinky cigars, and I'm allowed to occasionally drink.
Not
whiskey.
Around me.
No, Ted is
definitely around. Yeah, definitely around me.
Ted is weak. Ted is like
true.
a geisha.
I have weak lungs. I am like a lady. But the thing is, it's almost like we need to remind women. Okay. So let's say you guys decide to have your big revenge, and so you will make all the money. You will have all the presidents will be female from now on. You guys, all the members of Congress, you guys can do that. There's an argument to be made. It's your turn, babies. You've come a long way, baby. Go do it, Virginia Slims. Go do it. You run the country now. You drive the car, the 2025 legacy. It's all yours. Enjoy. But the thing is, then you've got to understand that there's a consequence here. Most of you guys are heterosexual. you're probably going to want to mate with us, and you're probably going to want us to be able to earn some money and not commit suicide because we're depressed. And you're probably going to want us not to die earlier than we already are dying because we're so stressed out and not making enough money and we're being mistreated. You're going to have kids. Half of them are going to be boys. You're going to want them to succeed and have a chance at life. You're going to have a brother that you're not going to be sleeping on your sofa because the dude can't find a job. I mean, so the point is we're all in it together here. And I don't know why why is that complicated for people to understand?
Well, and piggybacking on that notion and taking it forward, I mean, now you're seeing some real backlash to this, to the movement. And, we have the backlash against DEI, the backlash against all of those types of programs. I mentioned, the beard. Well, 1 out of 3 people on this podcast has a beard. It's actually more than that now. But my point is that now you're having this Rogan / hyper, hyper masculinity. And some of it gets really weird, like the incel movement. And those guys are just friggin' bizarre and possibly dangerous in many ways in their views of women. That to me is what happens when you corner someone, and Ted likes to mention the art of war, and don't give them any way out. And that's where men are today. We're cornered and there's no way out. There's no right answer. I was at a party that was being thrown by my son and his wife, young people that, in their 20s and early 30s. The neighbor showed up. He's a police officer. And this was right after the Black Lives Matter protests started. And I asked him, hey, so what are you thinking? What are your thoughts on the protests? Well, he happened to be black himself, but the collective gasp from these white children that, why is he asking the black guy? I'm not asking the black guy. I'm asking the cop. But the general presumption of all of them was white man ask, black issue, ask black guy. I was like, if anyone had bothered, and quite frankly, I know him, the neighbor. I've known him for years, and I mean, he's about 10 years younger than me. He totally understood why I was asking him. I just said, and he knew I was asking him because he was a police officer, and that's the kind of environment that we're creating, and it's dangerous. It's counterproductive. To Ted's point, we would hope for, like I said, that level playing field, the thing that, women were kept out. You had Beetle Bailey, the comic strip, and you had Miss Buxley was brought in, and it was hilarious when the general would chase her around his desk, presumably to sexually, assault her. And that was hilarious. Well, it's not. And those, that's somebody's daughter. That's somebody, you don't treat another human being like that. But conversely, you don't dismiss someone by just calling them toxic and saying that their opinions don't count anymore.
Simply because they have a Y chromosome.
Yeah, I didn't choose it. I was the fourth of 4 boys. My mom was hoping, and she told my dad she was on birth control. True story. And then I popped out. So the first thing I heard in my entire existence on this planet was, shit.
And even I guess you could say you could become a trans woman, but that wouldn't work now either. Everyone would be pissed at you for trying to use the girls' room and being in sports. There's no out. Once you're a man, you're trapped.
So what happens going forward? I mean, we have, I'm getting a sense of a stridently masculine, and I think probably destructively masculine movement. There is also a movement of just of
the backlash
to
the backlash.
Yeah,
to the backlash.
which is because America, that's what we do. We never do anything like, there's got to be a middle ground here, right? And of course there is. No, I look at my sons and how they're, navigating this world, and it's become more difficult, not less, for them. And but my oldest is living in an academic world, and that has its own problems. in this area as well. So going forward,
this has political implications too. I mean, as we've seen
hugely
in the most recent election,
huge.
I mean, so like this was a populist revolt, right? Populism is an appeal to the working class, and if you look at working class men, their incomes have collapsed in real terms over the last 45 years by 20%. Women's wages have remained more or less static in real terms. So, I mean, it is worth noting women aren't really getting ahead either, right? So there should be working class solidarity between men and women, because they're both being screwed, albeit at different rates. Men are being screwed more, especially working class men. But women are too, because all these increases in productivity are devolving to the rich elites, to the top 1 or 1/10 of 1%, not to the people who actually do the work. But the point is that that populist revolt, that like, fuck it. I mean, that's the thing, is the danger is if you keep telling people, fuck you, we don't need you, at some point they listen to you and they say, okay, I'm out. And they become alienated and they do their own thing and they listen to Joe Rogan and, they drive monster trucks and they become rapey and weird. Nobody needs that. It's like not, I don't know how we go forward. We need a correction to the correction to the correction to the correction at this point. And I don't want it to go the other way. I mean, otherwise we're just going to be like, it's going to be like that Maureen Dowd book title, Are Men Necessary? It's like, what the fuck?
Well, and go ahead, Rob.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, it's the British playbook, right? I mean, just divide everyone that could possibly fight you. If you're the ruling class, you want me fighting with everybody else, you want everyone else fighting with me. That way we're too busy wasting our own energy to realize that the people who are actually screwing all of us are the people who are trying to tell me to hate the two of you to hate me, and then hate everyone that's a woman, everything else. And it's just divide and conquer. That's all it is. People got to wise up to it.
You think that's what you think they're you really do think that's it? You think that is this an overt, covert? Is this a conscious effort?
It's a little bit of both. Yeah. I mean, especially if you see it if you see it on the right, like if you play in the MAGA circles, like, where I play at, you really see it a lot. So you have your MAGA retards, who you talked about the other day, who just look at Trump as if he is orange Jesus and whatever he does is gospel. And then you have the people who are like me, or kind of like the Thomas Massey types. And then you have the Republican types. So right there, you divided the right in 3 different neat little sections. They're all too busy fighting each other over Israel and foreign aid and NATO and all this other stuff. And then you have the same thing happening on the left side of the aisle where Ted is. So you have your feminists, then you have your cosplaying dudes who want to be called women, and then you just divide those pieces of the pie as much as you can. And if you're the ruling class, what you want to do is that you want to have these different groups all to be fighting each other. Like, you want the Black Lives Matter people to be blaming Whitey for all of their woes, and then you want to have Whitey blaming blaming migrants. That's where I fall. That's where I fall on the spectrum. That's my vice, right? It's just like, no, close the borders. Let's actually fix things here locally. Then you have people on both sides of the aisle, like the Angie Wongs, and then the people on the left saying, "Oh, well, Robbie, then you're being nativist." Where I'm looking at, from a working class standpoint, is that no, immigration is driving down wages, so that way we can't afford to live, we can't afford to organize, because you can't afford to pay your rent. It's all by design. It's
one side.
It is a strategy,
Robbie. It's like, speak to your point, if they allowed the same number of immigrants in, the same number, made them all legal, handed them all passports at the border, our wages would not be dropping the way that they are, because these are people who they're hiding in the shadows. They can't negotiate for higher wages. They get treated like shit or not even paid at all sometimes. It's like, our wages would not be declining as fast if these people were all legitimized. Instead, creating an underclass is really dragging down wages.
There is a ranch north of us in Lincoln County. For those of you who are watching, don't know, I live in Montana. And these ranchers, they're crying because ICE, they went in, they rounded up a bunch of migrants, and they deported them. Well, now this ranch owner's just like, well, now I can't afford to keep the ranch open. And so you have people in the town next door over, like, well, why don't you hire us to come and work on your ranch? Actually pay us a wage. And then the rancher's like, well, I can't afford to hire you. As well, then you deserve to go out of business then.
That's how I feel. I mean, it's like the first time I took a girl out on a date was for ice cream at Friendly's. I think I was 14. And I was like, tell me about tipping, Mom. And she's explained it. And I was like, oh, is it optional? And she's like, technically, but the truth is, if you can't afford the tip, you can't afford to eat. And I think it's like, and really, truly, it's like that. If you can't afford to pay a living wage, your business isn't viable.
No,
you need to call Kevin O'Leary and ask him for some advice about how to make your business work.
But the point I'm trying to get to is that the reason why we can't have a living wage is because everyone is so busy fighting each other, calling each other racist, nativist, homophobic, name whatever phobia it is that you want. And that's what the people in DC want. They want everyone to fight each other and be so stressed out with just trying to make a living that no one bothers to look up and realize the people who are screwing everyone, every segment of the pie, are the people who are wearing the suits. And that's the plan. So yes, to Scott's question, yes, this is a tactic. I mean, the British,
well, yeah.
I mean, they conquered India using this same exact thing.
Mm-hmm.
The Indians woke up one day, looked up, and said, "Oh my God, we've lost our country." Well, that's where we are.
Interesting. And I totally see it. I mean, and I have always said issues like, say, abortion. If one side could wave a magic wand and have it resolved to their satisfaction, they wouldn't have waved it because they were making billions of dollars that way. And so you're right. If there's a party that is for the Joe Rogan types, well, then the other party hates those people, which really they shouldn't, because frankly, I think there's on fundamental issues, we're all pretty similar. We want safe streets. We want the kids to learn how to read and write once they leave school. Pretty basic stuff. But yeah, maybe you're right. I tend to I like lists. I like rules. That's one of the reasons I became a conservative, because I believe in the rule of law. And so, Robbie, I'm not sure if you heard the podcast Ted and I were talking about what the Democrats should do going forward. I mentioned it earlier. They need to have a contract with America. They need to have that kind of, here's what we stand for. Boom, boom, bullet point. Boom, 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 boom. For me, I mean, what's masculinity? It's not some nebulous thing, but we can't, not all three of us, I've asked the question and all three of us cannot answer it, what masculinity in the 21st century is. I can tell you what it should be. Robbie and I we both go to church. We both are Christian, and we both, I think, subscribe to the Christian family model to one degree or another. I don't think my wife could be subservient to anybody. If you've ever met Janine, believe me, you know this to be true. But that's not what that is. It's caring for the man in the family, goes forth and is there to protect. He is there to provide. He is there to nurture. That to me is masculinity. And does that mean you can't cry? Hell no. I cried every God. It can be a commercial. Exactly. There could be a commercial. I mean, some commercial about a clothes cleaning solution, but there's something deeply moving. And so, I'm a wuss that way. But that's okay too. There, as I said, there's a middle ground. But defining what masculinity is, to me, is it stoic?
Well, and this is obviously something that, look, men in the wake of feminism have been trying to struggle with, right? There was the Iron John movement, the people who went out into the woods and did primal screams. Before that, there was, there were the rich guys at, what was that thing called? Bohemian Grove, where the rich dudes would go out and create an edifice and burn it. It was called Care. We're burning Care, and they dance around naked in the woods and north of San Francisco.
That doesn't sound masculine to me. That sounds like a gay orgy.
Well, that there's a gay orgy could be the epitome of masculinity. I don't know, but the point is that there's definitely this has been a struggle. Before we go, I want to ask both of you guys, and this is just sort of an aside, the latest stories about the mass arrests that are starting to, I guess we can't really call them mass arrests yet, but the arrests of pro-Gaza protesters. The most recent is a woman who is 21 years old. She's a Columbia student, a junior. She's came to the United States when she was 7 years old with her parents. She's a permanent resident. She has a green card. I guess she hasn't gotten around to becoming a U.S. citizen yet. ICE is chasing her because she participated in a protest last year at Columbia. There's no specific allegation of any wrongdoing whatsoever. Basically, she's being pursued for this. They broke into her apartment. They obtained a search warrant. Up until now, that's not something that ICE had felt that they were able to. No judge had given them a search warrant up until this point. She's on the lam. She has sued the federal government to try to stop her own deportation before she's apprehended. Because up until now, ICE detention is an administrative procedure. They're not really cops. You don't really kind of have to go with them. You know what I mean? They may kill you if you don't, but you really don't legally have to. They live in this gray zone. This is obviously the administration is going after as many Gaza protesters, especially at Columbia University, as they can. Any thoughts?
It's disgusting.
Yeah. It's just, I think all three of us are on the same page when it comes to First Amendment rights and acknowledging that any human being who steps foot on American soil is protected by the Constitution. And one of those guarantees is the right to free speech. This has gone so over the top.
They want to deport her back to Korea. She hasn't been there since she was 7.
I think that, you have to have sovereign borders. I totally agree with Robbie on that. You can't be a sovereign country. I know Ted agrees with me on that as well.
I do. That's common sense.
But how is there no due process here? That's the thing that really gets under my craw is that, we're scooping people up, sending them to I'm assuming it's a for-profit prison down there in El Salvador.
It's a for-profit gulag down in Louisiana. Yeah.
And it's no. I mean, in El Salvador.
Oh, that too.
The
one that Mahmoud Khalil is in Louisiana is a for-profit Louisiana gulag.
Yeah, well, I can answer this question for you.
Okay. Yeah. No, it's money. Yeah.
Yeah. It started under Obama. If you want to be honest about it, True. Is that the entire concept of rendition, where you scoop somebody up and you send them to another country.
Well, that was Bush.
But was it Bush? I thought it started under Obama.
Yeah.
So that's even better. So it just shows just how bipartisan the screwing is. And it is absolutely terrifying. I am not a Zionist. I'm a fundamentalist Christian. Okay. And I do not support the Zionist project in any way, shape, or form. I don't. And I say that full well knowing that the president who is currently in office now, who the vast majority of Republicans, the people who claim to be on my side, that orange bastard, he went up and he said, you take the guns first and you do due process second. And he actively waged war on the Second and the Fourth Amendments to the Constitution to the thunderous applause of conservatives. So it just shows us how bipartisan this screwing is.
Breaking news. This just came across. Couldn't ask for better timing. A federal judge has just ordered Trump to stop its efforts to arrest and deport her. Her name is Yun-So Chung. They've been after her since earlier this month. Judge Naomi Buchwald said in her hearing that nothing in the record indicates that she poses a danger to the community or any kind of foreign policy risk or has communicated with any terrorist organizations. She was not a prominent participant in the protests. She didn't even participate in the Columbia protest. She was at one protest at Barnard College, which was ironically a protest against the expulsion of Barnard students who had participated in the Columbia protest. She was, by the way, valedictorian for high school.
It's all thought crime. It's all thought crime. This is prosecuting someone based on your speech.
Mhm.
And mark my words, you have the APAC Republican types, and then you have Democrats who worship John Fetterman, that bastard who's just as bad as Lindsey
Asshole.
Graham, and
True.
they're just all doing this, saying yeah, let's screw all these people. No constitutional rights for you for anti-Semitism. Okay, that's fine. Define the term. What does that even mean?
By the way, anti-Semitism, fascinating thing, right? So I want for my next column for the Wall Street Journal, I wanted to try to see if there are actually any documented cases of actual anti-Semitic acts or of violence or speech that took place at any of these, anti-Israel protests that happened over the last year. So far, I've found 1.5 where it's like we're talking about incidents that, were not related, not anti-Zionist speech that has been conflated into anti-Semitic speech, where it's not like just a rumor. I heard someone say, like, sourced, provable, not even provable, but sourced and likely. Like, I, Ted Rall, accuse you, Scott Stantis, of having done this specific thing, something like that. And so far, it's about 1.5 incidents in about a year that I can find. I went online, I'm asking more people to see if they have anything. So let's just say that it's like 6 ultimately. Do you change your fucking country and get rid of the First Amendment over 6 douchebags? Because, like, if we're going to do that, I mean, there's 6 acts of violence that took place, like, I guarantee you, within like 1 block radius in the last 24 hours of my block here in New York City. I mean, why on earth are we doing that over basically a rounding error? This basically didn't happen. It's sort of like all the Vietnam vets who came back from and claimed that this is a fascinating story. They claimed that they'd been spit upon by anti-war protesters when they came back from Vietnam. And it turns out that just didn't happen. People started, quote unquote, remembering it after Rambo came out. And Sylvester Stallone gives this speech about that happening to him. And then people started remembering that it had happened. But there's no contemporaneous evidence that it actually ever occurred.
I'm not sure how to respond.
Sorry.
I think
Sorry, not sorry.
No, I think that the anti-Semitism, I think you could define it very broadly on the protests. I think certainly from the river to the sea, certainly wiping out Israel means wiping out Jews. I don't think Ted, you and I have debated this a lot.
I don't think any of those things are anti-Semitic.
I definitely disagree with you. I think they
are
absolutely
anti-Zionist. And you could be against anti-Zionism if you want, but they're different. They're 2 different things.
Don't say from the river to the sea. That's wiping out a country full of Jews. I mean,
no, it's not. It's from the river to the sea. Palestine will be free.
Yes.
Like
nothing there says it will be Jew free.
So if Israel gave voting rights to the Arabs who live under its control, that's not wiping out the Jews. That is giving freedom to the Arab population that are currently living under an apartheid system. There's no genocide there.
Yeah, there's nothing. No one said anything about expulsion or killing or harming.
Okay. Well, the implication is certainly there. I don't know that you can't dismiss that, because it's definitely part of what that whole slogan is. And wiping, and when you're waving the Hezbollah and Hamas flags, that's definitely, and those groups are dedicated to the idea of obliterating Israel. I mean, how do you say that that's...
As a vexologist, do you have, Scott Stantis, a Hamas or Hezbollah flag?
I do not.
Oh, but you'd want one.
I would love one, sure.
Yeah.
I'm a collector, so yeah.
I'll ask all my anti-Semitic friends to get you one.
The flag flying behind me now is the medieval flag of Lithuania, my people.
Of course.
Of course.
Oh, Lithuania. Well, I think we should leave it there, guys.
Sounds good.
Okay.
No, thank you for letting me come on.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's a pleasure. Robbie, we'll say goodbye to you for now. Talk to you tomorrow, I'm sure, if not sooner.
Peace.
All right. So that was Robbie West. He's our producer. And thank you, Robbie, for chiming in when Scott dropped off very briefly.
The voice of Montana.
Always. Oh, yes, he is. And so, yeah, so thank you very much, Scott, for a great discussion. I did enjoy it. I knew it would be good, but it was even better than I expected. So
Great. Good. Well, it's ongoing, and I would look forward to hearing what other people chime in. And I'm dying to know what people think of what they on this particular topic, because I think it's an important one.
All right. Thanks everyone for listening. Go check out Scott's stuff, my stuff. You're going to see it all in the scroll here, but we're both on Center Clip. We're both on gocomics.com. And that stuff. Here we go. Scott, say something.
Here we go. Go see Ted's stuff at tedrall.com. You can see my stuff at gocomics.com/Scott Stantis. And there's links to my editorial cartoons and to my comic strip Prickly City. Buy Ted's book. He's got another one coming out real soon that you're going to definitely want to buy. Trust me on this.